been taught to think of growing older as a one-way road, wear and tear, slowing down, letting go. But then nature, it tells a different story, listeners. Let me give an example. There is a creature in the ocean that, when it is stressed, injured, or reaching the end of its life, simply begins again. And today's guest believes that understanding that biology, it might change everything about how we think about aging, healing, and what the human body is actually capable of. So, welcome to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. Listeners, I am Sana, your host. And yes, this is where we have real, grounded conversations about mental and emotional well being, the kind that actually meet you where you are. So, listeners, today I'm joined by someone. Let me introduce a bit, share a bit about him with all of you. So, he's a homeopathic doctor. He's also co founder of Immortal Wellness, whose work sits at the crossroads of regenerative biology, longevity, and the science of how the body finds its way back to balance. So, listeners, let's get into the conversation and let's welcome our guest, Dr. Adam Suzman. Dr. Adam, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really up for this conversation.
Thanks for having me here.
Hey, dear listeners, before we begin, a quick note from Healthy Man Payavik. This episode is created for educational and informational purposes only. The views shared by our guests are their own and may not reflect those of the host or network. Nothing in this conversation should be taken as medical, legal, financial, or professional advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making important decisions. We encourage you to listen with curiosity, think independently, and use this content as a starting point for reflection, not a substitute for professional guidance. Now, settle in and enjoy the conversation.
Okay, Dr. Adam, before we get into the big ideas, regeneration, aging, longevity, um, let's talk about the humble jellyfish. Probably the moment when which changed things for you as well. So you have built a whole body of work inspired by a jellyfish. Um, I mean, most people would hear that. I mean, I cannot predict the responses, but they would just kind of feel wondering, okay, why, how, or maybe the maximum like smile politely and that's it, that's it. But what did you actually see in that in jellyfish that made you think, yeah, this matters for us, for human beings right now?
Well, I mean, it before we go into that, I mean, it came from I was in pursuit of disease generally and like the factors that cause us to get sick. And then I realized, I mean, it's quite an obvious realization, but the major cause of us getting sick is aging. You know, as we age, senescence creeps in, zombie DNA creeps in, and all these disease processes begin, which were kept at bay as we were younger. So I looked around at different strategies for how this sort of defeating of death is accomplished in the natural world. And turns out there's quite a few. I mean, I'm not going to go into them, but there's a lobster which stimulates telomerase, which keeps the telomeres long. There's a like a worm that can clone itself. But a lot of these relied on sort of very weird biochemistry that wasn't necessarily going to suit the human condition. So when I stumbled upon the immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii, I got quite excited because what happens with this creature, and it's tiny, it's the size of your your pinky nail. It's like literally, it's maybe 5 centimeters, or not 5 centimeters. It's like maybe 2, 3 centimeters long by maybe a centimeter wide. It's tiny. This thing floats in the ocean, and when it gets injured or it ages, it sends a message to its cells to begin this process of regeneration. Now, the message is applicable to us. What it does after that, we don't necessarily have the DNA for, because it turns on and off various genes in order to reduce the cells to like a primordial mush, like a jelly, like the undifferentiated stem cells, and then it basically blooms again. So if you want to think of it as an image, it would be like a a flower that flowers and then
Yeah.
gets scratched and then it dissolves back into jelly and turns into a flower again. It does this by dropping to the bottom of the ocean, and in a process of maybe 3 to 5 days, it basically reblooms. It forms again. So I mean, as a homeopathic doctor, I'd done a lot of work with water, and programming of water. That's largely what homeopathy is about. But so I thought, would it be possible to distill this message? So I was able to capture a homeopathic version and then actually synthesize a protein, which is this peptide, this messenger, which basically tells the cells to return to an earlier version of themselves. So, I mean, obviously, we can do this topically, like on the skin. We can apply it directly to skin, so it's very useful in creams. Or we can take it internally and have a systemic effect. But then we're kind of dependent on what the body perceives as most important to actually focus on. So, I mean, for example, if your liver was impacted and you took the jellyfish, it would begin the process of regenerating the liver. Or, when people started taking this, when I was experimenting with it, what people found was just more life force, more energy. Walkers became runners, runners became trail runners became skydivers. Everyone sort of had more energy than they'd had before. So they actually leveled up to a higher level of exercise because they literally had more energy. Um, so this shows what it can do systemically. What it can do topically, obviously, is we see this in skin cells where you put it on the skin cell and it actually begins to regenerate the skin cell, or the skin cell, even like cancerous cells, are returned to an earlier version of themselves, which doesn't include the distortion. So what we're seeing is a boosting of the immune system, a regeneration of the cells. When we put these drops in the eye, I have a product called Immortal Eyes, and when we drop this in the eyes, there's a condition called floaters, and it's a condition where the vitreous humor, the liquid, the jelly in the eye becomes thicker, becomes stickier, denser over time. And this is largely a function of age, sometimes of disease. But when we put this in the eye, a lot of these floaters would disappear as this liquid, this gel would become more liquid. It would become more able to move and stretch, as opposed to clumping. You think of clumping up in tea or something. So we saw, the more fast dividing the cells are, the more dynamic the experience is, the more radical the more radical the effect we were able to see in certain circumstances. So that was the immortal jellyfish in a nutshell. And, I've then added it to, I even used various like Hindu mantras. I've did a Lakshmi version, I did a Vishnu one, I did a Shiva one, I did a Kali one, because I wanted to add like flavors to this message. Because in the homeopathic form, well, it's not entirely homeopathy what I do. I take the frequency, but then I multiply it and I amplify it. I use the memory of water to basically layer itself more layers on top. If you imagine like a log with the lines, when you cut the log, the like the more lines is the more the old is. So what I was doing, I was like layering frequency on top of each other to create a much stronger effect, so that instead of like a little stone dropping in the water, we have like a grapefruit that gets hurled in the water, creating a much bigger effect. And this is what happens when we do this and then we give it to people. The people, even the skeptics, and there are lots of skeptics out there, start to feel it. If they are like, wow, I feel more alive, nails were growing faster, hair was growing faster, skin was regenerating faster. I mean, at one point I had to cut my nails twice a week, such was the speed of the cellular growth. I mean, still, it's like I have to cut them far more often than I used to, because it just stimulates more life force, which means faster growth of these fast dividing tissues. So, yeah, it's a very exciting discovery in terms of the biology of aging. This, as I said, this came out of a much deeper question, like what is it that's causing us to age and ultimately get sick? And obviously, aging is a major part of it, but some of my other remedies deal with the mental and emotional components behind aging, um, and well, death. I mean, death is a final process, but like the process of getting there. So I mean, as we get older, we become more weighed down with the worries of the world. We have more memory. Older people become more stooped because they're carrying more weight. They've got more patterning. So a lot of my other work with Immortal Wellness is around actually going into these unfinished patterns and removing them, allowing them to come to completion. I have another remedy called liberation, which the centerpiece of liberation is actually it's an Indian formula called Navaratna. I don't know if you know this, but it was made by Nagarjuna. He was a 3rd century Buddhist alchemist, and he burnt like 9 gems 100 times. For those people who don't know what Navaratna is, it's 9 gems. I know you know, but some of the Americans might not. But it's 9 gems, and each gem has been burnt 100 times. And it's essentially a karmic medicine. And that's one of the ingredients in this liberation. And what that does, it basically finishes off the stories of the past. So all the unfinished relationships, it'll produce that person in a dream, and we'll have the conversation we always wanted to have so that we can actually move on. And the net effect of this is that we feel a lot lighter in ourselves because we're not carrying as much of the unfinished baggage. When we think of karma, we often think of what happened. But the truth is, the other side of karma, or the other side of the coin of karma, is like what didn't happen. And this is the stuff we wanted to happen but didn't happen. So it's almost like this arrow came into us, it broke off, and we're not able to pull it out because we don't know how the story ended. So what happens a lot with this liberation is people dream about people from their past or dead relatives, and they come into their world and they have an experience with them, they meet them, they interact with them. It's not only in dreams. So, I gave it to a friend of mine in Dubai, and she said 3 of her ex-boyfriends phoned her on the same day. So it's obviously just to finish off the story, just to like, okay, let's finish off with this so that we can clear the slate and have something new. So I've gone quite deeply into the various causes of aging, because I mean, obviously, the more stuff we're carrying, the slower we will be. I mean, the I've got a new remedy called Universal Panacea, which is dealing with it's coming more from an alchemical perspective, and their view on disease is diseases as the result of residue buildup in the body. So think like rust. But rust for us would be arteriosclerosis. It would be like gallstones, it would be like kidney stones, it would be lung adhesions, might be like brain calculi. So just like the rust of existence. And obviously the older we get, the more of that there is. So this is working on clearing that out. And then I have another remedy called closure, which is about finishing the scenarios in our lives. So if someone had been through a traumatic event, it'll take one back to the event, but then take you out, with a pleasant experience, so that we're able to remove the event. But so much of our life, we're just playing out a lot of the body memories reaction to the past. If we've been bitten by a dog when we were younger, whenever we see a dog, we'll flinch. But if we have enough good examples of friendly dogs coming up to us and petting the dog and the dog loving us, that'll break this negative imprint. But this is what this remedy closure does. It goes into the story where there's a fracture, where there's like tension or stress or pain or trauma, and it'll almost like walk you out into a better scenario. And in so doing, a lot of the weight of the past kind of is able to be shed. So, I've really gone at this whole aging thing and health thing from a very different perspective, in that I've looked at like, what are all the factors, not just the physical factors, because a lot of medicine focuses on, the supplements around aging and like diet and exercise. And we all know that. We all know eat a good diet, exercise, these are parts of health. The jellyfish is another part, but the mental and emotional component is not as easy to focus on or actually even get back to. So this has been a lot of the gist of my work. The jellyfish has kind of led me to this because it made me realize that, any solution which doesn't cover all aspects of us will be incomplete and will fail ultimately, because we're not just these physical things with cells, millions of cells, which we can feed. Every week there's a new miracle supplement that's supposed to cure this or that or make us live forever. But the truth is, and this is from many years of research, is that there are many factors at play here, and we really get traction when we address all of them simultaneously. Then we can actually move forward with this. Like the remedy I was talking about, liberation. As I was taking this, it literally worked through all my old girlfriends, all my broken friendships, my family, and then acquaintances, until I was kind of clear with all of that. It felt like the space was clean. I didn't have any unresolved stuff. And the feeling in the body was just, I felt light. I felt, non-weighed down by the unfinished stories of the past. And, this is what children have, they're not weighed down by the past. They're not concerned because they don't have that much past because they're younger, obviously. It's only as we get older, we're not taught how to deal with the emotional, conflict, situational stuff, which is part of life, that we actually we begin to age, then all this unresolved stuff is sitting somewhere in the body and it's slowing us down. So my attitude with this is like, if one simultaneously goes to clear the mental, the emotional, and give a huge jolt to the physical in terms of a regenerative jolt, so it's like return to an earlier, healthier version of yourself while clearing a lot of the mental, emotional stuff from the past, then we can actually move forward quite quickly with this whole aging thing, and we can actually push it back. Someone asked me the other day, we're like, well, what makes you think we're not designed to die? And it's like, well, we weren't designed to fly until we invented the airplane. Now we can fly. We weren't designed to swim underwater until the aqualung was developed. Now we can do it. Yes, with the aid of mechanical things, but it's, for me, this jellyfish it's a technology. It's an organic technology, which is, I think the reason it took people so long to discover it is this thing is so tiny. People, in science, they tend to focus on the tiger or the elephant or the big animal, the exotic thing, something which they can see. This tiny little jellyfish was sort of under everyone's, they would look past it because it wasn't seen to be very interesting. But in truth, it contains one of the secrets of the universe, and it was sitting there almost in a way waiting for us to discover in order to bring into the world now so we can use it to regenerate. There's other questions around, like, well, do we, as a species, should we be living longer?
Yeah.
And that's another story. But I don't think everyone is going to pursue this because it requires one to go on a journey with this. It's not like, oh, just take this one tablet and then you'll live to be 150. It's like, okay, well, you might take 4 or 5 separate remedies working on different components, and it'll begin sending you on a journey, a reverse journey, to clear a lot of the stuff from your past first, and then one could proceed to move forward. But I don't believe it's for everyone, because it requires not effort, but some degree of commitment or interest, or a lot of people are just interested in the day to day. If they knew this was possible, yes, they would do it, especially as they get older. But often as people get older, they get sicker.
Yeah.
So, when we're young, we don't even think of aging. It's like, what's aging? And then we get to like 50 or whatever. It's like, oh, wait, hold on. I don't have as much energy in the morning. I'm not feeling as strong, but now I'm feeling stronger than I used to feel, even 5, 10 years ago. So I'm definitely improving on various levels, mentally and physically. So I'm very excited about where this whole thing is going. We'll only know in 20 years, but yeah, that's state of the nation.
Yeah, and if we look at yeah, in India as well, there are like branches, and these may not be currently supported by the scientific evidences, or for especially for treating serious medical conditions. Especially when we look at aging, I think it's a natural process, but then if you look at the current context, in the modern context, I think now people are talking about premature aging, premature graying, premature aging. Somebody who is in their 30s or in their late 20s, they may feel like, tired all the day. And I think most of it can be traced back to the lifestyle choices, or maybe sometimes, the conditions or the circumstances on which we don't have any control holding on to. I mean, there can be environmental reasons as well. But um my question, and this is a bit more like a skeptical one, Adam, that especially, regarding the jellyfish biology, how do you see the conventional medical world or the medicine world responding to this? Because it can look like as just a claim, or sometimes it can also be identified as a misinformation, because it can be sometimes misinterpreted as, this magical pill or magical remedy that can actually reverse age. But then let's say for a person who is taking the remedy, but at the same time not making any substantial changes in their lifestyle, they may not see the effects in there. uh, I mean, I'm just kind of, imagining a situation in there.
Yeah, it's always to some extent subjective. I mean, there are biomarkers you can check, but what we did see, and I've literally thousands of people have taken this now, and I've got amazing results in terms of like what's happened with this. It hasn't gone worldwide yet because I was focused on the other components of aging. Because I mean, the mind is also the mind in our history is that's probably my first love, like in terms of focus and the aging thing. I went down the kind of aging route with the jellyfish. I mean, almost as far as I could go until I realized that without the other components,
Mm.
that this was doomed to fail. But what we did find, I mean, when you talk about lifestyle, is people automatically started gravitating towards better foods and eating. Well, I mean, obviously, we can't address people's genetic factors. If someone has some terrible genetic disease in their past, it's like there's nothing we're going to be able to do against that. And, to do a proper, study on this, you would actually need to take a person and then actually clone them and then feed the one jellyfish and then the other not, and then see what would happen. But, when we're comparing a group, I've done surveys with this, and on the whole, people reported generally like much much higher levels of energy, generally faster growth of nails, of hair. There were specific demonstrable things that we could use as tags to actually show how this was working. Now, you know, it gets a little bit complicated because when you ingest something, the jellyfish, it's going systemically. So you can't say, oh, it's going to work on your liver or your heart or we had people who, ended up needing less insulin, for example. Some of the diabetics, they needed less insulin because the pancreas was working better, or some guy who was stage 4 cancer, he started doing much better, because he had more energy to get up and run around and do stuff before he was just lying in the house. So, I mean, there are, cases where it's been used against quite specific heavy pathology and it's come up smiling, but it's not absolute exactly where it's going to work. So I could take it and it could do certain things. I can tell you from what I've seen over like the thousands of people who've taken it, generally what people experience. And this is what I've talked about is increased energy. There's also phases when people take this. There's a phase where people often feel very tired and they need to rest. They need to. The body's saying like, look, sit down, rest, or they'll go to the fridge and just eat everything in the fridge and not put on a gram of weight because the body's literally saying, look, I need the nutrients to rebuild some of the structures in your body. So it's very much an individualized process. And even what happens when people take it, some people get a full-on burst of energy and then go into the hungry phase or the tired phase, which is when the body's rebuilding. Some of them go straight into the rebuilding phase and get quite tired and then boost up later. So it's, because we are so individual, and everyone's biochemistries working the same, but we have different priorities. And, what we often don't see is people's level of exhaustion. People are very good at covering exhaustion, and they'll smile and carry on. You might see dark rings under the eyes, or, a bit of lethargy here and there, but, we don't really know what's inside them, what's happening on the cellular level with the liver, with the kidneys. We don't know what's happening. So we're never entirely sure what's going to happen. But, I would say about 90% of the people, I mean, just as a statistic, 90% reported faster nail growth. I mean, it's hard to do so it's like basically 9 out of 10 people said they noticed a clear and obvious growth in their nails and their hair, hair growing longer and thicker and healthier and stronger. These were very easy vectors to monitor. But, I mean, to do a proper double blind test, you'd almost need to take two Jennies, the same biochemistry. So maybe if you took twins who had the same lifestyle and the same exactly identical genetics and tested them, gave one and the other not, then you'd be able to see. But, when we're testing against a group, we can use, I'm not testing it against a specific condition. The condition of aging is partly experiential, partly you can monitor, the cellular age, but some of that is, dependent on lifestyle. Someone can be 40 and have the cellular age of a 60-year-old and vice versa. So, there have been very few people who've taken this who have not felt a boost in, in Chinese medicine, they talk about Jing, which is like life force. And the Jing is often perceived through like the accelerated nail growth and hair growth and inspiration and desire to do things. And this is what we saw as well. A lot of people, had this renewed interest and energy to actually accomplish things. Yeah, but as I said, it only went so far, and that's why I did different versions. But then I realized, okay, you can boost the biology, but you really have to clear the obstacles, because the obstacles are like the brake on the car. Now, you can have a really powerful engine, you can rev it, but if the brakes are on, it's going to hold it back. So, a lot of the brakes are not physical. It's mental and emotional, and what that then does to our biochemistry. And that's much harder to monitor, like what anger does to our liver. It's very hard to monitor this stuff, because like how much anger for how long, and then what effect did it have on liver or enzymes. We know sugar sort of suppresses the immune system, but in terms of how emotions work related to the biochemistry, we're still in our infancy with that. We're nowhere near being close enough to be able to map that kind of stuff, because it's so fast. It happens so quickly. It can be angry and it's gone. But we all know the feeling of like almost having a car accident, and then the adrenaline pumping through our system, and then we almost feel nausea. So it's clear that these emotions do have physiological effects, but the long-term physiological effects are very hard to monitor. But this new remedy I made, closure, is it basically got 70 or 80% improvement in people's relationship with the world. So ability to control their emotions, not to get drawn into things, seeing their patterns for what they were, being able to step outside of themselves. And, that to me is equally as exciting as the immortal jellyfish, that we have something that can allow us control over the emotions, so that there's all these cases where, angry people, and then they get liver cancer, and the association of anger with the liver. And I've seen it, so I've seen that in clinical practice. I've seen that, and it's real, but it's hard to demonstrate. You can show the liver cancer and say, okay, this person is a very angry person. There we go. But there's also some that suppress anger, and they also get liver cancer. So, yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that it's quite a complicated subject, and there's many parts to it, and we're kind of best served by addressing this as all the parts simultaneously as much as possible, because then we can actually get headway, because we don't want the mind and the emotion dragging us back, or the physical's moving ahead and that's lagging behind, or the other way around. So the more we can take the brake off, we can push the accelerator, we can increase the engine. I mean, for example, with, one of the first things I noticed about the jellyfish was the blood flow. I was in winter Winter here, I mean, it's not like winter in Bangalore, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's still it's cold, but not that cold. It's not like America cold, but I was wandering around in my t-shirt because the blood flow was very strong, and I was like, oh wow, I'm actually not getting cold. And it wasn't so much that I wasn't getting cold, but the blood flow was strong enough so that I was able to heat the body quite effectively. So, and a lot of the disease processes stem from this, from poor blood flow. So if we're just increasing the blood flow, um, I even made a product called Miracle Tooth, which is to improve the blood flow in the gums and the nerves in the teeth. Because I had to go to a dentist, and he was about to give me a root canal, and then he was telling me about why why I was getting this problem, and he was saying, oh, the blood supply to the nerve is being diminished. So I used this remedy on my teeth. I sprayed it on repeatedly, and I never had the root canal. I mean, it's just one instance, but it's just showing how like increased blood supply to an area means better functionality of that area. And yeah, that's very exciting. I mean, well, I guess what I'm saying here is there's so many areas that can be explored with this. And I mean, there's only me, so I don't have that much time for I have some time for research, but my passion is really development and kind of like the cutting edge of where we can go with this, and how we can build a system that's so beautiful and so comprehensive that we can actually offer this to people. It's like, okay, well, if you consume these 3 or 4 remedies, this will actually propel you into a healthier mental and physical space, without a lot of the weight of your emotions, and more control over that. And then we can actually, then we won't age as fast. And I mean, whether we then live to 100 or 150, I mean, at this stage, I'm what, 57? I'll happily go for like 150, because as you get older, you start to look back, not forward. So yeah. So it's a good drive for me as well to know that, like, okay, this is age and it's not slowing down unless I slow it down, but it's a challenge. So that's how I've taken this whole thing on as a challenge to see how we can actually, evolve beyond something. I mean, in a similar way that, before mankind had steel, or gunpowder or the wheel, there was a very different society. But then when these things came in, they allowed us to forge weapons, to plow, we could do a lot more things that we couldn't do, and we weren't reliant on being. So this is, in a way, like an evolutionary step, I see. Um, the morality, I mean, that's another story, but that's a separate discussion.
Yeah. I think this can go for hours.
I know it's going on for a while.
Exactly. But as we are short on time, I have to wrap this up. But before that, Adam, if our listeners they would like to explore more, what other ways they can reach out to you or explore more
Well,
about?
I mean, I've got two hubs at the moment. One's in South Africa, where I am. It's www.beyondmedicine, BEYOND medicine, medicine.co.za. But we don't generally ship overseas. But for most of the world, it's Immortal Wellness, Immortal IMMORTAL, Wellness WELLNESS .net. That's the American branch, and that ships pretty much worldwide. But yeah, if they want to check out some of the information, there's slightly different branding, but it's exactly the same. It's the same stuff that's in all of them. We'll just change the branding a bit for the different countries. But there's a lot on the technology there, and the experiences, and yeah, I mean, if people want more, they can get it all there.
Super. Listeners, I'll have all the links in the show notes. So yeah, and thank you so much, Adam, for being here, and of course for the work that you're doing. And to all my listeners, I hope this conversation gave you a little more curiosity about your own body and a little more kindness and compassion toward wherever you are in the process of growing. And if this episode meant something to you, share it with someone who needed it. And I'll be back with more conversations like this one. Until then, take care of your mind, take care of your heart, and take care of yourself. Thank you so much.